The Ashby-de-la-Zouch Canal is a 31-mile-long canal in England which connected the mining district around Moira, just outside the town of Ashby-de-la-Zouch, with the Coventry Canal at Bedworth in Warwickshire. It was opened in 1804, and a number of tramways were constructed at its northern end to service collieries. The canal was taken over by the Midland Railway in 1846, but remained profitable until the 1890s, after which it steadily declined. Around 9 miles passed through the Leicestershire coal field, and was heavily affected by subsidence, with the result that this section from Moira, southwards to Snarestone, was progressively closed in 1944, 1957 and 1966, leaving 22 miles of navigable canal. The abandoned section is the subject of a restoration project and is the first canal where a new section has been authorized under the Transport and Works Act 1992. The Transport and Works Order was obtained by Leicestershire County Council. Some of the original route has been infilled and built over, and restoration therefore involves construction on a new route through the centre of Midland. It is hoped that all but the final 1-mile section of the canal can be reopened. An isolated section near Moira Furnace and the National Forest Visitor Centre was opened between 1999 and 2005, and is the location for an annual Trailboat Festival. Route. The canal starts at a junction with the Coventry Canal just outside Bedworth and travels northeast for about 7 miles through the town of Hinckley. It then continues to run north through largely rural and remote countryside for another 15 miles until reaching its terminus at Snarestone, near Sutton Chaney Wharf. It passes the foot of Ambion Hill, the site of the Battle of Bosworth Field. At Shackiston, it passes the station that is the headquarters of the Battlefield Line Railway. History. Origins. In the last half of the 18th century there had been an increasing need for transport to exploit the coal reserves at Ashby, Wolds and Lime from the quarries north of Ashby-de-la-Zouch. The first proposal was for a canal running from Burton-on-Trent on the upper River Trent to Marston on the Coventry Canal. A second suggestion was for a canal from Ashby Wolds to the Coventry Canal at Griff. Both proposals were made in December 1781. The first was opposed by the Coventry Company, though the second was not. Robert Whitworth had estimated the cost of the project at £46,396, but the scheme was dropped a year later. William Jessup proposed a canal and tramway between Bredon and the Trent, with a connecting link to the Trent and Mersey Canal in 1787, which also came to nothing. A proposal in 1790 was well received at the time, but opposition afterwards prevented a bill being submitted to Parliament. Another proposal for a canal northwards to the Trent at Burton was actively discussed between 1791 and 1793. There was wide support for a canal to Griff in 1792, but the muted support of Penn Ashton Curzon, a local landowner and Member of Parliament, led to it being dropped. In October 1792, Robert Whitworth revised his plan from 1781. The proposal featured a level canal from Griff, near Nuneaton, to Ashby Wolds, which would cost £63,402. For there it would climb 139 feet to a summit which would be supplied with water by a steam pumping engine. After a further 5 miles, the summit level would descend through 84 feet to level branches, which would serve collieries at Ticknall, Calorton, Cloud Hill, near Bredon on the Hill, and Staunton Harrow. The cost of this section would be £82,143. The plans were checked by Jessup, and formed the basis for a bill to authorise a company with powers to raise £150,000 of capital. Hard negotiation with Curzon and the Coventry Canal was required, during which the junction with the Coventry Canal was moved from Griff to Marston, but the bill finally became an Act of Parliament in May 1794. Whitworth and his son, also called Robert, were appointed as engineers in July, and construction began. Construction by October 1796, it had become obvious that the costs of construction had been seriously underestimated. In addition, around 1/4 of the shareholders had not honoured the pledges, and so the company had less capital than expected. The company decided that the only solution was to replace the branch canals with tramways. For a brief time at the start of 1797, the company investigated the possibility of extending the canal to the River Trent at Burton-on-Trent, and building tramways from the quarries to the river. Amalgamation with the Trent navigation was considered, but the plans failed due to the lack of capital. In May 1797, Robert Whitworth, Jr. became ill, and the Whitworths were replaced by Thomas Newbold. An investigation at the time into the state of the collieries at Ashby Wolds revealed that they were unlikely to be producing coal by the time the canal opened. By March the following year, the top section from Ashby Wolds to Market Bosworth was operational. The company had been considering the option of building tramways since 1793, and finally asked Newbold to investigate the possible lines for railways which would serve the canal at Ashby Wolds in June 1798. They then asked Benjamin Outram to advise, and he reported in September. He suggested running the lines to Wellesley Basin rather than Ashby Wolds, as this route would cost over £8,000 less. The lines as built ran from the basin through Ashby to a junction at Old Parks, where one branch ran through Lount to Cloud Hill, replacing the proposed canal and its diversion through Calorton. The other branch led from Old Parks to Ticknall, with branches to the quarries between Corlcabby and Staunton Harrow. The total length of the lines was around 12.5 miles. In 1799, Outram had discussions with the company about the gauge of the tramways, and although lines at Crichton for the Derby Canal used a gauge of 3 feet 6 in, he recommended that it should be made wider at 4 feet 2 in, forecasting that, within a few years, railways would be the principal mode of transport for merchandise. The wider gauge would increase the cost of tunnels and bridges, but only by £785 on a final contract price of £29,500. His quotation was accepted, although repeated requests by Outram for his contract to be signed were ignored. Outram's engineer for the line was John Hodgkinson, who was experienced in the work, but problems arose because the committee insisted that it should proceed on all sections of the line simultaneously, which made supervision difficult. Moreover, perennially short of money, they were dilatory in making decisions and providing funds, which caused Outram problems at his Butley works, as he was having to refuse contracts, so that he could be ready to provide the canal with material as and when it was authorized. During this period of delay, the labor costs and the price of iron also rose, even though Outram's experience of his treatment by the canal proprietors must have spoiled his satisfaction on the completion of the lines. They were arguably a major achievement and a model for railways in the future. Later history: the tramways were completed towards the end of 1802, and the level section of the canal from Marston to Moira was opened on the 19th of April 1804. The only lock was a stop lock at Marston, to protect the water supplies. By this time, the finances were not in good shape, as failures of the shareholders to honour calls on the shares had resulted in the company borrowing £21,539 to complete the work, and the mines were still not producing coal at a rate which would have made the canal profitable. The final cost of construction was around £184,070. The main source of traffic was from the pits at Moira, which steadily expanded, particularly in the 1820s, enabling the loans to be paid off between 1820 and 1827, and the first dividend to be paid in 1828. In 1819, the company and the Coventry Canal agreed to convert the stop lock between the canals so that it was only suitable for narrow boats, and they shared the cost of conversion. The reasons for this are unclear, since wide-beamed boats continued to operate on the canal, but could not move further afield. Profitability was improved after the company sent Crossley, their engineer, on a fact-finding tour of local canals in 1822. He investigated tolls for coal, and the system of drawbacks which some of them used. Such a system was then implemented on the Ashby, whereby coal travelling the whole length of the canal was subject to a refund or drawback on the tolls. The effect was immediate, with the amount of coal qualifying for the drawback rising fivefold between 1824 and 1828, from 4,367 to 22,011 tons, and reaching 37,316 tons in 1837. In 1823, there were calls for tramways to be built from the head of the canal to Swadlincote and Church Cressley. It took the committee 2.5 years to decide to proceed, and the 3-mile Swadlincote Railway was opened on the 21st of July 1827. It was built with double tracks, and used edge rails, similar to modern railways, rather than the L-shaped tram plates of the Wellesley system. The cost of £4,262 was financed by a mortgage, which was paid off less than a year after opening. The Tignall branch was extended in 1829, when a line from it to Dimsdale was authorised and built. The Calorton Railway, which was run by an independent company, and used edge rails, opened in 1833. Negotiations between the two companies resulted in a connecting line being built between Cloud Hill and Worthington Rough, which used a type of rail called a rib rail, where the vertical flange of Outram's L-shaped rail was made much wider, so that wagons with flanged wheels could use it as an edge rail. The Ashby engineer was asked to prepare a quotation for the conversion of the entire Wellesley system to rib rails in 1837, but there is no record as to whether this work was carried out. Railway ownership. In 1845, the Midland Railway were planning to build the Athos and Ashby-de-la-Zouch and Burton-on-Trent Railway, and offered to buy the canal for £110,000. They agreed to maintain the canal until the railway was built, but there was no longer-term agreement on its future, since most of the coal which used the canal travelled onwards via the Coventry Canal and the Oxford Canal. These companies faced a big drop in toll revenues, and fought hard to get the Midland Railway's bill amended, as well as a commitment to maintaining the canal. They also had a clause added which allowed the Coventry Canal to undertake maintenance and charge the railway for the work if the railway company failed in their obligations. An Act of Parliament was passed in 1846, which authorised the takeover, but the railway line as envisioned was not built. It was nearly 30 years later that serious railway competition arrived, when the London and North Western Railway and the Midland Railway jointly opened the Ashby and Nuneaton Joint Railway from Overseal to Nuneaton in 1873. The following year, the Midland reused the section of tramway from Ashby to Worthington, Leicestershire, enlarging the Old Parks Tunnel, as part of a line that ran through Melbourne to Derby. The remainder of the tramway lines were kept for local use, with the branch to Ticknall closing in 1915. The canal continued to carry significant tonnages, which gradually decreased, from 138,117 tons in 1862 to 113,659 tons in 1882. After that, the decline was more rapid, dropping to 33,329 tons by 1893. By the 1890s, the railway owners had reduced maintenance on the canal, knowing that the Coventry Canal were unlikely to invoke the powers under the 1846 Act, since they too were in trouble. On the 2nd of January 1918, there was a major breach in the canal when an embankment some 2 miles below Moira collapsed. The cost of reinstatement was £9,864. And the canal reopened on the 23rd of July 1919. The upper section was increasingly affected by subsidence from the coal mining. Despite this, the Moira Coal Company shipped 20,807 tons along the canal in 1943, and the total tonnage on the canal that year was 43,733 tons. The owners, by now the London, Midland and Scottish Railway, tried to give the canal to the Coventry Canal Company in 1944, but they refused it unless there was money to fund the maintenance. The 2.5-mile section from Moira to Donisthorpe was promptly abandoned, allowing the Moira Coal Company to mine under its course. Another 5 miles were closed in 1957, under an Act of Parliament obtained by the British Transport Commission, and the Measham to Snarestone section was closed in 1966, even though coal was regularly loaded there. Traces of the old railway can still be seen, particularly towards Ticknall. A low embankment, still with some stone sleeper blocks, crosses a field and a tunnel passes under the drive to Calcabby. There is also an arch bridge in Ticknall village where the line ran into the quarries. Restoration. The closure of the canal north of Snarestone in 1966 led to the formation of the Ashby Canal Association, to ensure that no more was closed and to work towards the reopening of the northern section. In 1992, the engineering consultants W.S. Atkins produced a feasibility study for the restoration of the canal between Snarestone and Moira, which concluded that there were no obstacles which could not be resolved. They also recommended that the reconstruction should be suitable for broad-beam boats rather than 7-foot narrow boats, as this would have ecological advantages. By 1997, Leicestershire County Council had bought much of the route, and had located 2 funding packages worth over £1 million. However, they failed to reach agreement with one landowner over the purchase of a parcel of land, and because the deadlines were not met, the funding was lost. They therefore resolved to obtain an order under the Transport and Works Act 1992, which would allow them to use compulsory purchase powers if necessary, in order to promote and assist the restoration of the canal north of Snarestone. The Ashby Canal Trust was set up in 2000. It is a limited company, with directors representing the Ashby Canal Association, the Canal and Amp River Trust, Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council, the Inland Waterways Association, Leicestershire County Council and North West Leicestershire District Council. Since the mining industry in the area has ceased, there have been fewer problems with subsidence, and the current plans are to reopen the canal to the National Forest Visitor Centre at Moira, about 1 mile short of its original terminus at Spring Cottage. Between 1999 and 2005, a stretch of the canal near Moira was restored and refilled with water, passing the historic Moira Furnace. A blast blast furnace from the 19th century which has been converted to provide visitor facilities including a craft centre, museum and cafe. The restored stretch is some 1.5 miles long, and includes a new lock built to overcome the problems caused by mining subsidence. Below the restored section, the way forward has been blocked by the construction of the A42 main road across the canal's formation. In November 2004, a public inquiry was held in connection with the application for a Transport and Works order. Most objections were withdrawn, leaving one from English Nature, which was accommodated by including a provision for offline nature reserves, and the order was granted in October 2005. The order allows Leicestershire County Council to purchase land and construct 2.5 miles of canal from Snarestone to Measham. Initially, this will follow the original route, but will diverge near Measham to use the track of a redundant railway. The new canal will pass through Measham Station and cross the High Street on an aqueduct. The Transport and Works Act order was introduced by the British Parliament in 1992 as a way of simplifying the legal processes for railway and canal projects, and works which interfere with navigation rights. Although a number of railway projects had previously been authorised under this legislation, the Ashby Canal order obtained by Leicestershire County Council was the first time the construction of a canal had been authorised in this way. Purchase of the land between Snarestone and Measham had been completed by 2010. Reconstruction of the first 100 yards of the infilled section began on the 26th of February 2009, after a grant from the East Midlands Development Agency was secured. The £0.5 million project involved the provision of a stop lock, a new slipway, an improved winding hole and a wetland nature reserve, running parallel to the canal and connected to it. The stop lock chamber marks the division between the part of the canal owned by British Waterways and that owned by Leicestershire County Council. Although no gates have been fitted while the length of canal beyond the chamber is short. On the 23rd of June 2011, Leicestershire County Council reached agreement with UK Coal for them to extract coal and fire clay at the Minorca open cast site near Measham. As part of the planning gain, UK Coal will alter Gallows Lane to allow the new canal to pass under it, will provide a water storage lake, reducing the cost of the next phase by £1 million, and will provide £1.28 million to fund the reconstruction of the section north of Snarestone. They will also make available any clay removed from the site which is suitable for puddling the new section of waterway. Coordinates. Bibliography.